We now call this regular meeting of the Jacksonville City Council to order. I want to welcome all who have come to the meeting tonight and all those who will be watching the meeting on G10 television. We're going to begin our meeting tonight by everyone standing for the Pledge of Allegiance led by Mayor Pro Tem Jerry Bittner, followed by the invocation by our city attorney.
Join me, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Heavenly Father, we pause to give you thanks. To give you thanks for this beautiful day, for all the blessings and benefits you bestow upon our city and upon each of us individually. We pray for peace. Peace in Israel, the Middle East, Ukraine. We give thanks that you are always present with us during the calm times and during the storms. And tonight we pray for all those affected by these horrific wars and conflicts, and again pray that your peace will prevail. We pray for our military serving here and around the world, and we pray always for their families, that you would be with them as their spouses and family members are deployed, many into areas of danger. And also we pray for our mayor and for our council, that your guidance and direction would always be with them as they deliberate our citizens' business. All this we ask in your holy name. Amen.
Amen.
Council, you have been supplied with a copy of the agenda for tonight's meeting. At this time, I'd entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
We have a lot of motions and a lot of seconds. Any discussion?
I'm going to third.
You're going to third it? Okay, you got a third. All right. So, any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we have our first section of public comment. However, no one has signed the sheet for this evening. So, if anybody came in late and wishes to speak, if you raise your hand. Yes, sir. If you would come to the mic over here and give your name and address to the clerk.
Good evening. Pastor Leander Milton. My address is 6608 Chatham Park Drive, Brandywine, Maryland, 20613. My phone number, 240-643-0422. I am from Georgetown, born and raised in Georgetown. I'm here tonight on behalf of Georgetown. I just want to ask a question in regards to the roads in Georgetown. We're really concerned about the roads in Georgetown. 50 years ago, the roads were nice, but not today. It's hard for two cars to pass at the same time on the road. I'm afraid that there's going to be a serious accident, or better yet, someone may get killed. We need to have those roads widened. We need to also have roads paved, and we need to have some lines put in the road. Since I was a little boy there's never been any lines in the road. I was born in 1959. This is 2023. And I think our tax dollars should merit us getting some lighting in Georgetown, getting our roads widened, getting the roads marked so we can be safe on the roads as the residents of Georgetown. I also want to make another notice that there's only one way into Georgetown. If there was a natural disaster, all the people that lived in the inner Georgetown would perish because we can't get out. Wouldn't be able to get out. There's only one way in and one way out. I would ask the board to consider another way or making another way into Georgetown so that we, if there in fact is a natural disaster or a man-made disaster, we wouldn't perish in the back there. We'd be able to get out. For so many years, I think Georgetown has been neglected. I'm not here to pass any indictments. I'm here simply to say it's time for Georgetown to be considered based on our tax dollars that we pay every year. We should be considered for these things. I shouldn't have to ask for these things. These things are natural, aren't they? When you want better roads in your community, when you want roads with lines on them in your community so you wouldn't have people almost killing each other in the curb. And that happens every day in the Georgetown community. There's no lighting in the Georgetown community. I think that we should have lighting there. It's a health hazard for the people that live there. So I'm just asking the board tonight to consider Georgetown when you're making your recommendations of how you spend your money based on our tax dollars being spent or paid in the Georgetown community. I think we do merit lighting and we do merit better roads.
All right, thank you for your input, sir.
You know what, Mayor?
Yes.
To talk to you about this, because one of the things dealing with the curve, I think we had this conversation before, and I think there's supposed to be a conversation with someone to look at getting the easement there, so we can actually possibly deal with that curve, because it is a blind curve and it's been blind for years. Also, Josh, city manager, we talked briefly before about, and the lighting is bad all over the city, and trying to find out if there are other ways. It might be something dealing with solar out there where we could create some kind of, if we can't get regular lights because of the cost, maybe we could go find out some other remedy. So,
Mayor, if I could just add for Mr. Jackson, the challenge with the streets is not the quality of the streets, the width of the street. And Mr. Jackson's had this great community input session recently. So one of the dialogues that has to happen in any community is the property owners have to allow us to obtain that width. So when we expand the road, it's not the road you're driving on, but it's spot on. The width of the road is an issue on multiple streets inside of Georgetown. Mr. Jackson's talking about there's 2 curves inside of Georgetown. Those are a challenge. Same thing. It goes back to a property owner, and we want to be able to have that dialogue with a property owner. But a lot of times you have challenges because the property owner may not have property that allows you to straighten out a road. So we are looking at it. Our engineering and public services teams looking at the area. Lighting is tricky because some people want lighting, some people don't want lighting. So we have talked about some area lighting opportunities that may be a low level lighting that we see in other parts of the country that could have a solar aspect. And then the concept of lines on streets, we can do that, but for most of our city streets, we don't put lines on neighborhood streets. It's just not a practice. Typically you see that on state roads and on federal roads. Some of our streets we will do that depending on if we have curb and gutter and sidewalk, but it's not a big deal. We just need to figure out the master plan. We don't want to stripe some of the streets and then figure out we're going to go back and widen one side or the other. So master plan, these are one of the things that Tracy's team's looking at, Mayor, for how we focus on a neighborhood and do some improvements. So we're working on that, and hopefully we'll have a response sooner rather than later, Mr. Jackson, especially when we come up on our vision planning. As we start looking at CIP, the acquisition would be phase 2 after some engineering design. We'll have to talk about that during our retreat with council.
When you had your discussions with the community there in Georgetown, was speeding a concern?
It has been a concern, Mayor. We've had a couple of communities that have had concerns. It's not always, as you know, it's not the issue of the speed necessarily, it's the safety on the streets. And so we've increased patrols in a lot of neighborhoods. We've tracked some speeds in a lot of our neighborhoods. We don't see that the rate of speed is the issue, but it's still that safety. And I think a lot of the lighting concerns, and then width of a street is always going to be a concern where the car looks like it may be going faster on a small residential street. So
Yeah, that's true.
That's what I say, Mayor. There's a lot of factors that we've heard from a couple of different community groups that are definitely extremely valid, that we've got to figure out that comprehensive plan. But we're working on it. And I applaud the council members that have pulled us into some neighborhoods to look at these concerns so we can put together a bigger plan. Not just Tracy, but Chief Yanero has looked at some concerns. So we're working on it, and by next month, by our Vision Council retreat, we'll have some concepts.
Okay, very good.
I have a question.
go ahead.
Oh, I was about to say, do we currently know how many transportation bus shelters we have in the Georgetown area, if there are any at all? Because I know that there is a population of many individuals that do not have access to transportation. So currently, how many bus shelters do we have on our routes in Georgetown?
So, Dr. Washington, we do know, I apologize, I don't know individual numbers. I don't know the bus routes, but we do know it's on that sheet that we've sent out to council, and I can send that back out again. It's all based on the use, and we base all of our models on how much use we're getting on each bus. You know, council approved some new shelters this year, so we're working on those actively right now. We had 3 or 4 different requests for shelters, and Anthony's team's working on those. But we can clarify where those at. Anytime we get a demand for someone that wants to use the public transportation system, we want to meet that demand because we know that's the reason why we have it. It's the reason why council stepped up a couple of years ago and said, let's do it and let's do it correctly.
I know it came up concerning shelters before. I think there's a stop over near where the DMV is. I think it's
Up near the street?
Yeah, Anthony might could.
But that's in the opposite
That's what I'm
direction.
saying.
That's
I
not
don't think that's the
Georgetown.
closest one though. He might could tell us more.
Mayor, I wouldn't know. Anthony would know the specifics.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for the opportunity. Could you please clarify the location?
I think that is the closest one to Georgetown Community. And the bus stop, is that the one near DMV or is there one in the community?
The plate agency?
Right.
Yes.
That's the only
So that
one.
is one where we're going to install a shelter, hopefully within the next couple of months. The challenge that we've had is even though we had the money to buy them, the lead time in having them fabricated and delivered was about 8 months. So they just showed up a few weeks ago. We've got all the design plans approved and we're bidding a project now to build the pads and to have them installed. I believe there's one going there and there's also one going over near the McDonald's on Georgetown.
But what about in the Georgetown community itself on Erectus Road back in
I'll have
Evening
to-
View Church? Because there's individuals that live back there in that community.
Sure.
So specifically for that community, where are they going?
The bus route only runs on Georgetown and Broadhurst.
Broadhurst.
That's
Well,
the only-
Broadhurst is Georgetown Road. It just depends on which way you're
It's
turning.
the farther end of Broadhurst.
Yes, so there is one stop back there, right next to the Board of Education. And I don't remember if we're putting one there or not, but I can definitely take a look and get back to you.
So not back in the community of Georgetown.
The bus
By
doesn't actually
Evening
go
View.
really
Is there
far
a
back.
possibility that that route going to be extended?
Back into the neighborhood. Just the challenges that we're talking about with the width of the roads and the curvature of the roads, the vehicles that we drive for transit just simply can't get back there and turn around. So we do bring the loop in down Georgetown and then back out Broadhurst. And industry standard basically says if you're within a quarter mile of a bus stop, then you've got really good service. Because we do expect, this isn't a front door fixed route service.
I think one of the things that is on the minds of the Georgetown community is probably, I want to say maybe about 8 years ago. There's a back property that faces the water, and the property was owned by Dr. Hunter. And the concept at that time was to build a gated community with a riverfront marina restaurant as well as a medical clinic. And it really sat dormant. Nothing really happened. Well, in August, that land was sold for $1.7 million. So I would imagine that someone, an LLC, that is spending that amount of money on riverfront property just bought it just so it can look good. I am pretty sure that there is going to be some type of design for that particular community that LLC would want to see infrastructures in that community. And it would be a shame that for individuals who have lived there all of their lives, third and fourth generations, who have been lacking without for years, and now all of a sudden, a major LLC comes in to the neighborhood, and all of a sudden, we're going to give services or talk about services when these taxpayers should have been getting these services all along.
The challenge, Mayor, and just like the conversation about a second exit, as we look at our development standards now, we always want to see 2 entrances and exits. That's something that we present to you all the time. And so when we're doing development standards now, you have this requirement, that we make sure it happens. But there's multiple communities that we drive into every day. It just wasn't built that way. And so adding those now, they are going to take it's a larger development project. So like Dr. Washington's saying, if you have a company that comes in and they want to build out 200 sites on that property, for example, they're going to have to figure out what that next exit is, because that's part of their development, and that'll be a requirement that they would have to work in. I don't think you'll see the city say, we're going to do these services for that developer, because it's not what we do. You know, it's not the way that we do business in the city. Now, we do want to make some of these improvements because of traffic flow, because of safety, because of the community input, but not based on that developer coming in. Do we want to give them transportation stops? That's not I agree with you. It's not our reasoning for what we would do, and it doesn't fit within our strategy for how we develop those stops. So I think this is it's going to be a bigger discussion for us at the visioning, but it's going to be a challenge to figure out how we make it happen, but we're active on it.
Just like you've done with other organizations, you can come out to the Georgetown community and have these conversations as well, correct?
Yes, sir.
Because they're probably concerned about how they would get out of there, you know, if something did happen, you know, so.
Well,
you know, I think that would be.
I think your first dialogue that you've had with him, Mr. Jackson, I think that's a really strong start, just like the conversation we had a couple weeks ago with Dr. Washington. I think that's the place where if people understand the things we're trying to do to improve the community, not just taking land for no reason, but we may need to widen a road, add a sidewalk, potentially add curb and gutter in some areas, that makes it possibly amenable to the property owners instead of the city's coming in just to take the property for no good reason. We want to see those improvements happen throughout the community, because the wide streets, they help us in every aspect of our service delivery. And not to mention, curb and gutter helps us with stormwater issues. And I guarantee you, there's a lot of areas in Georgetown that we've looked at that have stormwater concerns and ditch maintenance concerns that this could help and alleviate some, even cresting of a road and the way that the road's designed, multiple issues. So I think the community meetings are a really good way for us to get the word out, Mayor.
we went through that development approval process for that previous project, the biggest issue they had to overcome was roadway access. And we went through a transportation impact analysis process that probably took us, I don't know, it seemed like it was 6 to 8 months to figure out what all was necessary to make that project work. And all of those improvements were actually the requirement of the developer. So in addition to the infrastructure they were going to need to put in to support the homes and condos and the retail that they wanted to build, they were going to have to make improvements to the surrounding road network to improve the roadways for everyone, and particularly to handle the additional traffic and safety concerns that they were impacting. But I will definitely follow up with more information on the bus shelters. I do know that we are installing some in Georgetown.
Thank you.
If I may make one more comment, the school buses come in the neighborhood, they go all the way to the back and turn around and come out. I don't understand why the city buses can't come in, turn around and come back out.
It's because we operate on a headway system where we've only got a certain amount of time to serve a very large portion of the community. And when you get a vehicle back and on those smaller roadways, it really consumes a lot of time. So if we spend time back in the neighborhood, we don't end up serving the overall community. So we try to keep our buses on the most primary roads that are out there. And when we go back into the neighborhoods, we stay on what we call collector roads, where, you know, the residential roads are feeding traffic into those so that they can get out to the main roadway system.
Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor.
We're going to move on now to the adoption of minutes and consent items. We have minutes from the September 19th, 2023 regular meeting.
Move approval?
Okay.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. All opposed? Okay. Next, we're going to move to item number 10 on your agenda. This is a map amendment or rezoning from residential multifamily high density to corridor commercial at 6800 Western Boulevard. And Jeremy Smith will be presenting this item. Jeremy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. Before you is a rezoning petition submitted to the city by Western Boulevard Partners for 6800 Western Boulevard. The request is to rezone approximately 22 acres from residential multifamily high density to corridor commercial. Before you on the screen is a map of the property. The area bordered in black is just part of the larger approximate 49 acre tract. The front half is currently zoned CC, corridor commercial. This is the existing zoning of the property, again noting the existing corridor commercial to the front of the property. To the west of the property is the River of Life site. To the north is residential single-family zoning, which is the site of the Vineyards, which is currently under construction. And to the east is the Palisades apartment zoned residential multifamily high density. Before you on the screen is the Campbell Land Use Plan, which identifies this property and everything adjacent to it as mixed use. The proposed corridor commercial zoning district is supported by the Campbell Land Use Plan. Therefore, staff and the Planning Advisory Board is recommending that the City Council approve this rezoning request, accepting the evaluation found in the staff report, and findings of fact A through J being found in the affirmative, and that the rezoning advances the public interest by creating more development opportunities. Staff, along with representatives from Tidewater and Associates, are present to answer any questions that the council may have.
Council, any questions of Mr. Smith? Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you.
There is a required public hearing on this matter. At this time, I'll recess the regular council meeting, open up the public hearing. Is there anyone that wishes to speak to this matter? Please indicate by raising your hand. Seeing no one, I'm going to close the public hearing, reconvene our city council meeting, and you're being asked to consider the proposed request, council.
Mr. Mayor, I'm gonna see if I can get through this one without getting tongue-tied. I move that we approve the rezoning request, accepting the evaluation found within the staff report based on findings of fact A through J being found in the affirmative. That rezoning advances the public interest and creates more development opportunities.
Have a motion on the floor.
Pass them out.
Second. We have a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed. That brings us to item number 11. This is a text amendment on the Unified Development Ordinance, Section 4.2, and Jeremy will be presenting this item also.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. Before you in this item, agenda item 11, is a request from Campbell Storage Solution to amend the Unified Development Ordinance, specifically the use-specific standards, set Article 4.2, and then the request is to change the minimum lot area for self-storage facilities from 2.5 to 1 acre. This is specific to self-storage facilities. Staff has done some research, and the original draft of the UDO had 1 acre in it. And given some of the historical self-storage facilities that the city has seen, that 2.5 acre requirement seemed legitimate. However, as self-storage facilities have changed and the models have changed and they've gone more vertical in our day and time, the multi-story facilities do not require that much acreage. And so staff is supporting this request to amend the Unified Development Ordinance to change that use-specific standard for self-storage facilities from 2.5 acres to 1 acre. Again, any self-storage facility proposed in the corridor commercial zoning district will come before the board via special use permit. And those in the industrial zone are permitted outright as long as they meet other city standards via site plan, stormwater, building permits, etc. With that being said, staff is supporting this proposed amendment along with the Planning Advisory Board, and that our adopted Campbell Land Use Plan, Policy 38.2, suggests that we revise development regulations to be responsive to innovative development proposals and existing conditions. And And with that being said, staff stands ready to answer any questions that you may have.
Council, any questions of Jeremy? Thank you.
Thank you.
There's a required public hearing on this matter at this time. We'll recess the regular council meeting, open up the public hearing on this matter. If there's anyone present who wishes to speak to this issue, please indicate by raising your hand. Seeing no one, close the public hearing. Council, you're being asked to approve the, consider the Unified Development Ordinance amendment, text amendment.
Move the text amendment for adoption.
Second.
I have a motion and second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed. We're going to move along here to item number 12. This is a UDO text amendment. This is for enforcement and criminal penalties, elimination of criminal penalties. And Ryan King will be presenting this item. Ryan.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Agenda items 12 and 13 are interconnected, so my presentations will have a little bit of overlap, but we'll address the next item as well, but there will be some overlap. Recently, planning staff, along with neighborhood improvement staff and city manager's office, have been discussing enforcement remedies for Unified Development Ordinance violations. Article 8, Section 8.6, Remedies and Penalties, Part C, currently states the amounts of civil penalties for violations or violations of this ordinance shall be $500 per day for each violation or violations for each day the violation exists. And that's per the state statute. That's the maximum amount that we're allowed to have as far as a civil penalty goes. So with this text amendment, we are asking council to add the term up to in front of 500, and that will allow city council to consider the annual fees with the annual budget process. And it could be $100, it could be $300. It gives the council the flexibility. So we want to add up to 500 in the Unified Development Ordinance. In conjunction with this, we want to, we've prepared a couple of house cleaning items to align with the North Carolina General Statute. So we're going to strike everything in the UDO as it relates to criminal, except there'll be one part left that will reference criminal violations for subdivision. So we'll reference the statute for that. And additionally, we noticed while we were going through this process that our definition for family care home no longer references the correct general statute number. So we want to correct that with this ordinance that you have in your attachment tonight. And with that, staff and the planning board is recommending approval of the changes. And then, as I stated, we'll discuss kind of the specific fees with your next agenda item. Be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions, council? Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
Have a public hearing on this matter. We'll recess the regular council meeting, open up a public hearing. Is there anyone here present tonight that wishes to speak to this matter? So indicate by raising your hand. Seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing. Council, you're being asked to consider the UDO text amendment.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move approval of the UDO text amendment as presented to bring us into compliance with state law and state code.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, motion carries. Brings us to item number 13. This is the FY24 fee schedule amendment for planning and permitting, and Ryan, our planning and inspections director, will be presenting this item.
Thank you. In light of the action that the mayor and council just took on the previous item, part of our discussions, we recognized that there was no fee set in the fee schedule. So this request is to have the council identify what that violation fee would be and to add that to our annual fee schedule so that if a violation exists or violations exist, that we can assign the appropriate fee if the UDO violation is not abated. So we're Staff is recommending, although that the state statutes allow us up to 500, we've kind of polled other cities and towns, and there's definitely a different array of the way that folks do that across town. There's some that graduate from lower to higher, some just flat fees, and we've taken the simplistic approach. We like to keep it kind of the same, and we're recommending that City Council adopt $250 per day for each violation or violations for each day the violation exists, and that will give us the ability to collect fees if there's indeed a zoning violation that's not corrected. Be happy to answer any questions that the mayor and council may have.
Any questions?
Let me ask you a question, Ryan.
Yes, sir.
So this would be for a company or an individual, correct?
That is correct. It would be for anybody that has a violation.
Yeah, 250, I could see that for an individual, but there's a certain community of a concern of mine that, you know, or other communities coming in that might take the same liberties and not taking care of their business faster. I'll just say that.
Mayor, and part of our concern, the reason we bring this to the council is in our enforcement with Mr. Larson, and as we're looking at these items, right now, as it sits, we're sitting at $500 per day per incident. And so we're bringing it back to council to lower that based on your annual fee schedule. But back to the point where Mr. Jackson's at, you think about the difference between a business, a commercial use, and a residential use. I will tell you, we go through a myriad of connectivity options as we're enforcing our code to try and work with all of our citizens, whether they're a business owner or they're a residential citizen, before we get to that point. But at some point, as we hear from multiple communities, we've got to take that action. And that's been where Mr. Larson's at.
And I understand, like small businesses, they will run into some of the same issue with paying a larger fee. But when you're talking about larger businesses that take advantage of time or wait to make a sale before, you know, anything's ever corrected. And I just don't want us to run into some of the same problems, and maybe we can further discuss this as we go forward on how we'll remedy those issues or deal with those issues as they come in the future.
Well, another benefit of putting this in the adopted fee schedule versus going through about a 60 to 90-day process to go back to the planning board for a unified development ordinance amendment and then to city council, if there's concern, you know, 3 or 4 weeks at the most, we can have something back in front of city council for consideration if we do run into a problem. But I think at the end of the day, we're seeking compliance, not so much collecting fees, but the fees have got to mean something in terms of if the fees are less than what the benefit is, then there's no reason to comply.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Council, you've been asked to approve the fee schedule amendment as presented.
Make a motion, we approve the fee schedule amendment.
Second.
I have a motion and second. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Brings us to item number 14. And this is the designation of voting delegate for the National League of Cities Convention, or Summit, annual business meeting, I'm sorry, that it will occur November 16th through the 18th. So,
Mayor, I do want to add in your staff summary we put on here that we do have 2 members that are planning to attend the League of Cities Conference. Historically, when we have members that are going, we would like to have those people be our voting delegates. And so if we have that recommendation from either member that wants to be that voting delegate, we would welcome that opportunity.
Do you need a nomination, Mr. Mayor?
yes.
I believe last year Dr. Washington was the voting member and Mr. Jackson was the alternate. Is that, if memory serves, I think that's the case.
Because I was on the board of directors.
And I think it may have been that way for a couple of years, so I'll nominate Mr. Jackson this year to be our voting and Dr. Washington to be an alternate. Give him a chance to step up and represent.
The nominations are closed. And candidates elected by acclamation are appointed.
Okay. All those in favor of the motion indicate by a hand vote. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Item number 15 is ordinance directing code enforcement to have structures at 102 and 108 Country Club Road demolished and removed. And Jason Larson, our code enforcement, Chief Code Enforcement Officer, will be presenting this item. Jason.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Thank you for hearing from us tonight. This is a demolition of 3 different structures on 2 different parcels. One is 102 Country Club Road and 108 Country Club Road. This is located right behind the church, the old Church's Chicken on Belfork. About 7 years ago, code enforcement got our first complaint about high grass and weeds at this location. Until then, we hadn't had any problems. This was an immaculate property. It happened to be owned by a Montfort Point Marine and his wife. Mr. Hayes had passed, I want to say 2012 timeframe, and then in 2016, Mrs. Hayes passed away, unfortunately. So I wasn't here, didn't get the honor to meet them. But there were no heirs to this property. It has been abandoned. There was some roof failure to this property, and then of course, when Florence came, it just made matters worse. So since Florence, all the structures on this property has just dilapidated into an uninhabitable state. Asbestos tests were done this morning. I obtained a warrant and went into the property. For the first time, we had interior inspections. This is the outside, so this is the main structure. As you can see, a lot of damage, not only on the roof, but on the patio, on the wall. You can see the front of the building is actually bowing out. That's not just siding, that's the structure itself. So there's a lot of issues with the building. This is the second building, so there was 2 dwellings, of course, 2 properties, two dwellings. So this is the manufactured home that is on 108. And then I said this morning, these are 2 photos of the interior. So we did do an inspection this morning to try to see if we can locate any memorabilia. We do know this is possibly some historic preservation interest. We've contacted Montfort Point, but unfortunately the ceiling collapsed a long time ago and there was nothing salvageable inside. I was able to collect some historic photos of Mr. Hayes and his wife. I think he was a minister of some sort, so there's some memorabilia in there and a couple of other documents that we were able to collect that we're going to submit to Montfort Point. But other than that, there wasn't really anything salvageable inside. But as you can see, it's definitely uninhabitable and needs to come down. The unfortunate thing is we had an asbestos tester on site with me this morning, and he was fairly confident that there was asbestos in the ceiling, which of course now is on the floor and on the ground and on the furniture and everywhere. So the collection of this particular dwelling, the big one, city crews are not going to be able to touch because of the asbestos situation. Now, we don't have a report back from that, but we're pretty confident that's going to be the situation. Not only that, but the manufactured home in the rear, we're not going to be able to dismantle either. So tonight, due to the totality of the damage, the timeline of the foreclosure that's upcoming, code enforcement is recommending that council orders to have this demolished. I do not have a cost for this. It'd definitely be over the value of the home, 50%, but we do need to wait for that asbestos report. When that asbestos report comes back in a couple of weeks, we'll have a much better knowledge of what it's going to cost, because we are going to have to bid that out. So when that report comes back, then we can send bids out to get what it would be for abatement. And then at that time, code enforcement staff can present for demolition for the cost.
What happens to the land after all this is done? Does it get sold to pay back the cost?
That's a great question. So every time that code enforcement demolishes a structure, and we get an order from city council to have it removed and abated, whether it's a voluntary demolition, which we have done several times, or it's an order because of an absentee or what have you, and Mr. Carter might have a different answer on this one particularly, but whether it's voluntary or it's ordered by council, the city never takes ownership of the property. The only thing that we do is take ownership of the demolition. We get it demolished, we get it to the ground, we get it planted and seeded so that grass can come back, but we never take ownership of the property. That always belongs to the owner. So we just had 108 through 112 Newbridge Street demolished. That still belongs to the owner. It's just an empty property now. This will be a little different. We won't own it, but I believe this will go to the county.
Yes,
Mr. Carter.
I want to answer Mr. Sosa's question, but this is air property, and we did run an ad in the paper. So, Mr. Mayor, if you just inquire if anyone's here claiming ownership or having any interest before, it's not a public hearing, but the court system is very particular now. When you have air property and there's no heirs at all out there, et cetera, and that's one of the problems here. But at some point, I'd like you to inquire. But let me answer Mr. Sosa's question. This property is in tax foreclosure. I've been in touch with the attorney who's handling that, and he's one of the ones who told me about the court and why it's taking so long. You have to actually get a guardian appointed to represent no non-existing heirs and et cetera, et cetera. So it's a complicated and long process. One of the things that we're working on this one is, and I want to talk about 208 and 212 New Bridge Street, is that we're trying to get this one accomplished, and then again, the attorney's going to work with us, so that when the property is sold at the courthouse steps, that'll happen to both lots, Mr. Sosa, that in addition to a very lengthy lien that we have for mowing grass for a long period of time, we will also have whatever X amount is for taking these buildings down, so that the opening bid would be Y, whatever that may be, and that's our plan. On 208, 212 New Bridge Street, that property has a tax that's owed for the last couple of years of $300. But I've been again, there's only two attorneys that do tax foreclosures for Onslow County. One is Mr. DeSelms' firm, and the other is called Zacchaeus Law Firm, which is out of Jones County, Mark Bardeal. Been in touch with both lawyers, but Mr. DeSelms is working me on that one. Again, the county's position is once you get behind in your taxes, we're not going to give you 3 or 4 or 5 years like they've done in the past. We're going to carry it on through the tax foreclosure. And I've actually got a half dozen lawsuits from because we're always notified to make sure there's no additional liens. But I digress. Let me go back to 208, 212. In that particular situation, Mr. DeSelms is going to work with me, and I've already sent to him the lien that we filed there for the $70,000, so that, again, the opening bid on that property will hopefully be 70 plus whatever the cost may be. Now, the county may end up with that property, but hopefully the outcome of all of this will be that the city gets back the money that we have expended to tear down these dilapidated buildings on these properties that are being in tax foreclosure, and also do a great improvement to the community. But again, Mr. Mayor, if you just inquire, since we did do an ad to see if anyone else is here who has any interest, so we can have that in the record if no one is here. Yeah, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
All right. Is there anyone here that has an interest in that property as an heir?
Thank you, sir. We'll start that in the record.
Say something.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Hayes, Mrs. Hayes, I don't know if you all remember Yang's Oriental Market. They were the owners to that property. They were great people as well, so.
Thank you for that note. Yeah. All right. So any other questions of, well, are you through with your presentation? Okay. Sorry about that. Any questions of Jason or Mr. Carter? All right. You're being asked to consider the ordinance.
Move adoption of the ordinance.
Second.
Motion second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Okay, let's go do it for that. So now we're going to move on to some discussions. And I think we got the first one up is the Recreation and Sports Master Plan update. And Mr. Prince.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak again. We have a group of wonderful folks who are here to talk to you about the recreation and sports complex project, but they're actually waiting for us in A and B. So we're going to bring them on in here, and then we can get into the presentation. The best part of this is that you're not going to have to listen to me. You get to listen to these wonderful folks who actually know what they're talking about.
Not that we don't want to hear from you.
I'm sure I'll be up here at some point before we're done. But the folks who are coming in, they've been wonderful. As you recall, we went through a pretty extensive process to select a consultant firm to do this work for us. And I have to tell you, and I've told everybody this that I've talked to about the project, this is the best firm that I've ever worked with, period. They've done an exceptional job. They're very responsive. They kept us on time. They kept us on budget. And look, they're all here. We threw you a curveball. We're in the council chambers now.
Posters.
So if you would, just have a seat. And so again, these are our friends from the McAdams team, who is the prime consultant that we hired for this project. I'll introduce Jason Galloway. He is our project manager. He's the one that's kept us on time and on task, which is great. He's not going to have much of a speaking part tonight, but once we get into the actual design process, he's going to be front and center on that. We also have Sarah Burrows here, who's actually a sub-consultant for Sage Design. And Sarah's done a lot of work for us over the years. All of the landscaping that you see on the bypass and on the Jacksonville Parkway and around town on the highway, Sarah did all of that design, as well as the Lejeune Trail and Jacksonville Station. So she's worked with us for many years. She's going to talk to us from the Recreation and Parks Master Plan perspective. And then we also have Brian Connolly here. He's with Victus. He's everything sports facility, sports tourism related. And he's been a wealth of knowledge for us in that area because this is something that's very new to us. He's going to speak to us from the Recreation and Sports Complex Master Plan perspective. So again, this is one initiative with two basic projects running underneath of it parallel. We have the Recreation and Parks Master Plan, which is an update that we want to do to make sure that our plans are compliant with all the Part F requirements so that we can actually pursue grants to implement once we get to that point. But then we also have the Recreation and Sports Complex Master Plan, which is what we refer to as the 400 acres. Both of these things are happening at the same time. And once we get to the end of the planning process, all of that work is going to overlap so that we're planning for the 400 acres as well as for the community at large. The main event tonight is to give you a review of our public engagement results. We've been working on that for a number of months, and we've got some great insight for you there. And then Brian's going to give you some preliminary recommendations for the 400 acres. We really don't have any pretty pictures to show you or anything like that, but the feedback that we've gotten and the analysis that they've done really gives us some good compass bearing on where we might want to start moving with that project. And then, of course, we'll wrap up with some next steps to talk about how we're going to finish this come February. We want to have all of this done and ready to go by February. So, with that said, Sarah, do you want to come up and?
Is it just right?
Yes, ma'am. Just
Okay.
right and left.
All right, thank you. Good evening. Thank you for having me here. I have enjoyed working with your community over the years, but specifically on this project. Parks are fun, and so it's really exciting to talk to your community and listen to what they are interested in, and I've had a great time with your staff doing the engagement process this far. My focus is going to be talking to you about community engagement for the systems plan. But one of the things that I think is really important is there are many layers of getting information, and why that's important to us as a team is we want to make sure we're hearing from everyone. So we are coming at this from many different perspectives. There's the statistically valid survey. There's our in-person community engagement. We've had opportunities to engage stakeholders throughout the community. And we've gotten to attend some of your events. I really enjoyed National Night Out, and the board that's down here is from that engagement session. The reason it's highlighted is because we take into account all the comments, but we had so many kids come up, and that, to me, is a really fun part, because we always get to talk to their parents, but it's fun to talk to them. So this is where we are in the process, and our job is going to be tying all of these fantastic ideas and methods of input together, including what we hear from you guys throughout the process, in addition to what we've already heard from the advisory committee. So we are in this part of the process right now. We're still getting our results from the ETC survey tied into everything, and Brian's going to go over the sports tourism. And again, I'll highlight our community and public engagement. We've hosted various stakeholder sessions over at Jacksonville Station. We've met with your advisory committee. We've had open houses with staff. So we've been in City Hall. We've been able to talk to staff. We've been over at the recreation centers and out in your parks and gotten some really fantastic ideas. The way we approached this was trying to get broad input and ideas on themes that people were interested in, and very specific ideas to let them be creative and open-ended on things that they want to hear, not pigeonholing them on what we think they need to have for recreation. And I love that, because we get ideas like the bouncy castle from some of your participants, to things like ninja courses. That we as adults sometimes wouldn't present to them. So it gives us an opportunity to really hear what some of the needs are. I think one of the things that is really important as we move forward and we start to look at the 400 acres, there are different things that are needed from your community, but we start to see some trends in the information that I'm hearing, some of the things that the ETC survey is resulting, and what Brian is going to talk to you about in a few minutes. And that is, there's a really strong interest in having components that celebrate and support economic development, and there is a very strong interest in having components that support health and wellness. That's not to say the other themes and initiatives are not important, but those are the ones that we're seeing come through as common components amongst all of the different mechanisms of input. From our imagination board and some of our open-ended items, these are the things that are coming through. There is a really strong interest in having access to aquatics and a pool. People would like to have a dog park, a splash pad, trails and greenways. There's a lot of support for the infrastructure you already have in place, and so I think that's generating a lot of interest and energy for expanding that. Really strong interest for having indoor facilities and recreation components, having adventure facility components, and that's things like ninja courses and climbing and jumping, sports fields, water parks and slides, and inclusive facilities and programs. And so these are things that we kept seeing over and over again, whether it was open-ended conversations. This is one image of one of the boards. We have a lot of different boards from the different layers of input. So we pulled all of those together, and that's where this is coming from. What we've heard so far from all of these points of input, when we looked at our strengths and opportunities, and we looked at the themes that people were interested in and the specific activities and facilities, as I mentioned, economic development and health and wellness were priorities. There is really strong support for your recreation and park staff and what they're doing now and the facilities you're providing. I will say that's not always the case, so it's very good when we have conversations and we talk to your community to hear that. The strongest and most used facility right now is Jacksonville Commons. That's the one that people mostly identified with and where they recreate. Again, there's high interest in access to indoor recreation, and that isn't just one type of facility. People would like to have access to fitness, strong interest in having events and athletics. Water was a reoccurring theme that we heard, whether it was more splash pads. They love the one that you have at Northeast Park, access to pools and aquatic recreation. High interest in walking and biking facilities. There were also additional comments on making sure that there was additional connectivity between those facilities so that people could easily get from their neighborhood to a greenway. And then also interest in having something inside. So if it's dark or if it's too hot or the weather's not great, people would like to still be able to recreate. The terminology, or one of the things that we heard was that there is a strong interest in having additional access to evening and weekend programs. And so the terminology gaps in service, that was something that people wanted to see more of from your recreation service providing. So I'm going to let Brian go ahead and talk, and we can take questions at the end, and he'll focus more on the sports tourism components.
Good evening. My name is Brian Connolly. I am the managing principal of Victus Advisors, and we have been leading the sports tourism analysis over the last couple of months here. Just to give you a quick overview of our particular focus, this fits within that overall engagement plan that Sarah talked about a few minutes ago. Our focus has really been on sports market research and then community engagement locally and regionally. So from a research standpoint, we inventoried local sports and recreation facilities and programs. We also looked at within about a 5 to 6 hour drive time range where your local sports groups are going to take part in tournaments and activities. What markets are those? What facilities are they using? What events are active in the region? And then from a community engagement standpoint, we started locally. We did one-on-one interviews with a wide variety of stakeholders over a couple days here in the market. And then we also did interviews, I believe about 15 to 20 interviews with local sports groups and local sports organizers. We also pushed out a sports community survey separate from the statistically valid recreation survey, but just focused on parents and coaches that are involved in the local sports community to get their sense of what the needs are from a sports standpoint. And then lastly, on the community engagement side, we conducted another 15 to 20 interviews with regional sports organizers from the standpoint of various types of tournaments and multi-day events that drive economic impact. So we talked to organizers from just about every sport, both indoor and outdoor, that are active within that 5 to 6 hour drive time range. So we're able to put all that together, first to do a SWOT analysis, so strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats for Jacksonville as a sports tourism destination, and then also to identify what the primary sports market and sports facility opportunities could be for Jacksonville if the city decided to build new sports complexes. So in terms of that SWOT analysis, across the top you have the strengths and the weaknesses that are internal to the city of Jacksonville. So before you think about the outside market and the competitive landscape, what is Jacksonville strong in? Again, from a sports destination standpoint, where is Jacksonville weak? And then the O and the T, the opportunities and the threats, are external. So when you go out and you look at the market out there, what are the opportunities and what are the threats? What we identified from a strength standpoint was Jacksonville has strong hotel, retail, and restaurant inventory. All of the event organizers we talked to said there's lots of options for family-friendly hotels and family-friendly restaurants. The location of Jacksonville was a positive. All of the event organizers felt it was a good place, easy place for anybody from North Carolina, South Carolina, other parts of the Southeast to be able to access within that 5 to 6 hour drive time range for events. And then there was a positive perception of the area overall in terms of being a city that has a lot of young families, a city that has the military presence here, and tied to that as well, a brand around sort of health and wellness and active community. On the weaknesses side, number one, there was simply a lack of sports tourism caliber facilities. And I'll talk a little bit more in a few minutes about what that means. It's really about the inventory of fields or the inventory of courts or whatever else that might be all in one location. And then number two, although the city's strong in hotels and retail and restaurants, there's a lack of family entertainment options. So one of the things we hear about from sports organizers all the time is when we take an event to a community, you have to have that facility, obviously, that we want to use. And then we also want the hotel and the retail and the restaurants very close. And then lastly, we want something that the families can do while they're there. Because it's not always the one kid who goes to the tournament. It's the father, the mother, the grandparents, the brother, the sister. And they go for multiple days. They'll stay a night or two in that community. So they want to have family entertainment options as well while they're there. From the opportunities and threats standpoint, the opportunities for the city and sports tourism would be to attract regional visitors from that 5 to 6 hour drive time range, and I'll show you in a minute what that looks like. Number two, all of the research we did, the stakeholders we talked to, the local leaders we spoke with, there was a lot of local support for this concept of sports tournament facility development. We work in some communities where they don't entirely understand what sports tourism or that means, but just about everybody we spoke to said, we see that sports tourism can be an economic development opportunity. It can also provide state-of-the-art facilities for our local use. And so it's kind of a win-win from that standpoint. And then number three, just from a branding standpoint, to be able to bring in more visitors, help continue to grow that brand that's already out there about being a family-friendly, healthy, active community. There's an opportunity there. In terms of threats, regional facility competition is always going to be a factor. Anytime new communities build similar facilities, they can be in direct competition. But I'll talk a little bit in a minute about how you can position your location to be able to sustain these facilities for the long term. And then number two, the location of the 400 acres. A lot of people we talked to said, as the roads are currently designed there now, there could be potential issues for the neighborhood there based around traffic running through the neighborhood. But most people we talked to said that if the city is proactive about designing a new traffic flow plan, designing how the entrance and exits and all that flow is going to work, and communicating proactively with the neighborhoods, that's something that the city should be able to figure out. As I mentioned, we did a local facility summary. What we generally saw is there was a lot of, there's one court here or two fields there. But when it came to actually having those larger inventories of sports spaces in one location that most tournament organizers are looking for, from an indoor court standpoint, there was no facility with more than 2 multi-use courts in one place. From a multi-use field, which is rectangular fields, soccer, lacrosse, things like that, there was one soccer complex that had 8 fields. All of the remaining complexes, and this is Onslow County wide, had 5 fields or less. From an outdoor ball field standpoint, the common says 8 ball fields, a mix of youth and older age groups. All the others have 1 to 2. And then aquatics, there was a limited pool inventory overall. When we talk to the user groups, and this is local and regional user groups, all of the indoor sports groups we spoke to expressed some level of interest in using a new indoor sports facility here. All but one of the outdoor groups we talked to expressed interest in using a new outdoor sports facility here. The usage model that became very clear through these conversations is what we call a hybrid model. So typically during the week, it's used for local games, local practices, things like that. And then on the weekend, it's dedicated to economic impact in terms of tournament activity. And that provides an opportunity as well for your local groups not to necessarily have to travel outside the market every weekend. When there's events that are drawing people in on the weekends, they can stay home more often as well. In terms of court uses, just from the groups we talked to, we found opportunity for up to 27 weekend tournaments per year within the indoor space. There's also potential interest from indoor track groups. If there was an opportunity to design a facility that could also incorporate a track to host some weekend track meet events in there as well. And the local groups, even outdoor groups, said if there was a track, we would use that for training when the weather's bad and things like that. And then from an outdoor field standpoint, we found, just from the groups we spoke to, again, interest for up to 47 annual weekend tournaments. This was, keep in mind, this is This is both for baseball, softball, diamonds, and for rectangular fields. And it was roughly split down the middle. And oftentimes those might be those will typically be two different types of groups that would use those fields. So it's kind of 23, 24 for baseball, softball, and the same for soccer, lacrosse, and flag football, groups that would use rectangular fields. I mentioned the regional tournament drive time zones. So this is a map. The inner circle in red is showing a 2.5 hour drive time range around the project site, the 400 acres. And then the green one is showing a 5 hour drive around that site. So when we look at sports tourism, we like to think about the idea of your facility and your community being the hub on a wheel. And so you want to be able to draw groups that wouldn't otherwise be able to play each other because they might be 10 hours apart. So with your location, you can say, all right, groups from Richmond, groups from Washington, groups from Baltimore, come down, and you can play groups from Charlotte and parts of South Carolina and Greenville and even into Georgia. And so when you look at that 5 hour range, there's about 17.5 million people that live within that 5 hours. So there's a significant opportunity to be able to say, okay, we have the facility and we have all of these other amenities to be that hub for sports tourism. When you look at, this is a map of a lot of the regional sports tourism facilities that we built out based upon where your local groups are traveling most often on the weekends. And this is about 16 or 17 facilities, both indoor and outdoor, that we identified as the most frequently utilized for tournaments by your local groups. So when you start looking at what is a sports tourism caliber facility, the indoor sports facilities here all have at least 8 basketball courts in the building, which are typically convertible, the basketball courts 2-to-1 to about 16 volleyball courts. Some of them are even bigger than that. When you start looking at outdoor sports complexes, all of these have at least 10 rectangular fields, and the baseball softball ones have at least 9 baseball softball diamonds. So when you're talking about sports tourism facilities, you're talking about having high inventories of fields or courts or whatever that might be in one location. And then I'll talk a little bit more about the ones that are the best positioned to be sports tourism destinations for the long run have more than just the facility. Other thing to note, all of these facilities, the top 17 that your folks are visiting are publicly owned. So very frequently using visitor taxes to help fund these projects, whether it's sales taxes or hotel taxes, tourism dollars. And of those, I think just 2 of these actually are publicly operated. So a lot of them are either operated by a local sports organizer, operated by a third-party management firm that specializes in sports facilities and sports marketing. And then there's a couple where they're operated by the Parks and Recreation Department. Typically, it's a Parks and Recreation Department when there already are a number of facilities in that market that they have operated, and to be able to operate a new facility, they wouldn't have to necessarily completely build a department to do that. We do a lot of, I mentioned the sports community survey we did with your sports community. We do those all over the country and have done that over the past 10 to 15 years. So we've got literally tens of thousands of responses from sports communities all over the country and sports organizers from all over the country. And when we put all of those surveys together, one of the key questions we ask is, why do you go, what do you consider your favorite market to visit for sports, and why do you choose that location? 71% of respondents cited the sports facility. So far and away, and it's always between 65 and 75% on every single survey, no matter the community. The reason that they're going there, and the reason they're going there the first time, is because you have the sports facility, one complex, one indoor facility, whatever it might be, that draws them there because you can meet the needs of their tournament in one place. Then we say, okay, what are the other factors beyond just the facility that don't just get you to come the first time, but get you coming back year over year, potentially even signing a long-term agreement with that community? And number two, believe it or not, and usually this is about 10 to 15%, is the level of community interest and support for that event. So they want to go places to play in a competition where they feel wanted there. They feel like the red carpet's been rolled out for them. And especially if a community is known for a particular sport and their local teams are strong in that, groups will come from 5 hours away to play against those teams in a community that is known for that sport, where people will show up just to watch, even if their kid isn't in there. They wake up in the morning, walk out of their hotel room, the local newspapers in front of their door, and there's a picture on the front of their child catching a baseball or softball. So that level of community interest and support and that excitement around the event, the groups like the TDA or the Chamber of Commerce that organize excitement around the event, that makes a big difference in people wanting to come back because they feel seen and celebrated. In terms of our recommendations about what we see as the biggest facility opportunities for Jacksonville based upon all this research, the first facility opportunity we identified is an indoor sports and event center. And it's important to note that there's a reason we say "and events." So throughout our research, we obviously identified a need from the indoor sports standpoint, but we also heard quite a bit about, frankly, that there's, outside of a few hotels that have small banquet rooms, anything over a few hundred people, there's just no space anywhere indoors for those types of events. And so what we see a need for is a sports and event center. And what this is it's not a recreation center, but it's also not a giant basketball arena that's going to seat 10,000 people. It's really kind of a hybrid venue that we've seen more and more of over the last decade, and we've worked on quite a few of these now. This example that I'm sure many of you are familiar with is the Rocky Mount Event Center. It was built in 2018. Most of the ones that we have in our comparable set in our report were all built between 2018 and 2023, and there's a number more in development around the country. But as you can see, they have the ability to lay down 8 basketball courts. You can then overlay 2-to-1 volleyball courts and get up to 16 volleyball courts. You could use that whole floor to do a trade show, to do a conference, to do a job fair, things like that. They also have meeting rooms you can see to the side. At the top here, they have a family entertainment center and party rooms. So overall, I think last year they did about 25 weekend sports tournaments there. They also did close to 250 community events that used the meeting space or used the floor space in the larger area for larger banquets and meetings. So it's a really flexible venue that's going to get used. In their case, it's over 250 days a year, and drive economic impact throughout the year. The second opportunity we identified was an outdoor tournament caliber sports complex. And we found demand for both a rectangular field complex with at least 8 fields, artificial turf, which prevents rainouts, and also allows all the weekday use you want and all the weekend uses you want without tearing up the fields and making them unplayable for tournaments. Lights are important as well to enable tournaments to run more teams through and create more economic impact for you. And on the same side, for baseball fields, having 8 or more baseball fields with lights, again, artificial turf infields, which allows for more play and durability and reduces rainouts for tournaments who spend a lot of time and money booking these events, setting them up, selling registrations. If you can reduce their rainout risk, they're more likely to work with you. In this situation, I think it's important to point out, we're looking at the indoor sports center as something that could potentially be, an anchor facility within this 400 acres. Rocky Mount Event Center, it's in a little bit more of their downtown area, but it sits on about 12 acres, I think. Ideally, with parking, if you have all the parking there inside, it might be 15 to 20 acres. In terms of these outdoor complexes, here's an example, Grand Park Athletic Complex in Myrtle Beach area. I think that's about 13 fields plus parking and some other, park amenities on it. That's 90 acres. So when we're talking about some of these sports uses, you've got 400 acres to work with. So you could do multiple of these types of opportunities and still have a lot of space out there at that park to do other things. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But one of the things we're also recommending is, from a baseball field standpoint, it probably doesn't make sense to build an all-new 8, 10, 12 field complex when you already have 8 fields at the Commons. And my understanding is that there is some additional land at the Commons area, so you could do another, 4-field pinwheel there and get up to that 12 number there and kind of continue to build on that as your baseball, softball complex. And then maybe the rectangular field complex could go next to this indoor facility on the 400 acres. Last piece is think about the things that not only get the events there the first time because you have the facility, but make them want to come back. After the facility itself, which is number one, and then number two, the excitement and the welcoming and rolling out the red carpet for the events. What comes after that is the hospitality amenities. It's hotel, restaurant, retail, and family entertainment. So if you can provide the facility, the organization, and the community to welcome those events and make them feel important and excited to come back, and then having the hotels, the restaurant, the retail, and the family entertainment, not just somewhere in your city, but on that site or close to that site, you're going to create what we call a true sports tourism destination, where people can drive in from out of town, park their cars, and in some cases never have to leave that site. They're going to spend their time there, enjoy their time there, spend the money in your community. It's going to be captured in your restaurants, retail, et cetera. So what we would encourage to look at as additional opportunities on that 400-acre site around the sports tourism development would be active family entertainment options. I showed you in Rocky Mount, they have that indoor, so you could do arcades, clip and climb and rock climbing, ninja courses, golf simulators, things like that indoors. Or outdoors, you can do sort of water park type amenities with slides and things like that. You could scale that down and do a splash pad. We're seeing zip lines and ropes courses and adventure courses and things like that for outdoor recreation. And again, these are things that can be entertainment options for the visitors, but also great attractions for your local families as well. The hospitality piece, as I mentioned, one of the things we'd recommend, given that you have such a large acreage out there, are there opportunities to potentially do, if you look at the frontage area in particular, hotel, restaurant, retail, opportunities to capture that economic impact right on the site and make it that sports tourism destination for the families coming in. And then given that there is the neighborhood nearby, if you can orient restaurant and retail towards the neighborhood, it also kind of gives a buffer between the sports facilities and the neighborhoods, and also gives them an amenity that they can use during the week for shopping and dinner and things like that. Other things you could look at would be, on the rectangular sports complex, as well as sort of the Diamonds complex, making one of the fields in either of those scenarios sort of a championship stadium or championship field that has 1,000, 1,200, 1,500 seats. Gives you an opportunity to host a little bit larger sort of championship games and things like that, or potentially even host. I know there's a Woodbat Summer League team that's come in recently that could potentially use something like that. And then also that indoor track element, as I mentioned, having a indoor running space that could be a standalone facility. You could use the center as like an artificial turf field and run out the turf field as well, or you could potentially look at how that could be incorporated into that indoor sports center building. There's models we've worked on similar to Rocky Mount, where they've also been able to have a track in there as well. So, next steps. Is that you?
So before we get into next steps, are there any questions of Brian and Sarah?
Not so much a question, a comment, observation. I'm excited. One of the lived here for 30 yeas. Married a Marine is how I got here, but this is home, been here for 30 years. One thing we consistently hear from everyone in all neighborhoods is there's nothing to do here. And there are things to do here, but what's missing is the fun component, the family entertainment, as you noted, strongly and clearly well. There's not a lot of the entertainment components. And on the slide that had the dots of the responses, those top two were not terribly surprising, I don't think, to anybody on the panel. Economic development and health and wellness with Parks and Rec, that makes a whole lot of sense. Number 3 is kind of what caught my eye. That's arts and culture. If you've ever heard I'm pontificating, I apologize, last sentence, but if you've ever heard the word food desert, and you know what that is, we're kind of living in an art desert. That's my term. I've coined it. I use it on a regular basis. But there's a lack of public art and some of the creative, human-friendly components for people to just engage with and enjoy. And so this is exciting. I know there's a long way to go before we get there. But just to see the community's, kind of amen on that of, yes, we'd like to see that here as well. Because we hear it, but now it's kind of quantified, which is fun to see. So thank you for your hard work, and I can't wait to see what comes next.
So any other thoughts or questions?
Just have a comment. The pool showed up pretty high on the, can you pull that slide up, please?
Nope, wrong way. Here we go.
I think that justifies our investment in the YMCA community pool, and it, I think, shows that we are listening to our constituents and being responsive, so.
Well, and as a project team, we just put check mark next to that one. I mean, frankly, because that's a need that's going to be addressed by the YMCA over time. But, then right below there, you get into some others that, could fit very well in a variety of different environments for our community. One thing that struck me was just the overall consistency of the feedback. Whether it's the survey that went out or whether it was the interviews that we did or the stakeholder groups that we talked to, we heard the same thing. Indoor space, additional rectangle fields for outdoor space, and even things like the dog park and the trails and greenways. All of these things are related to quality of life. And again, it was just great to hear that consistency. And then when we get here to Brian's analysis, a lot of this stuff makes sense. I asked Brian, so Brian's from Park City, Utah, and I asked him, so how many people live within a 5-hour drive radius of where he lives? And he said probably what?
4 million, maybe.
3 or 4 million. Okay, Mr. Ray, you know that. So, I mean, we've got a market here. And when you look at the strengths, one of the things that I think we can take a lot of pride in is number 3, the positive perception of our area. Not only do they see it as a great family community, but they also see it as a safe community. So those are key things. I'm a dad, we travel. Those are things that I think about. Those are things that you all have thought about with your children. So, again, I think the team has done an excellent job here. A lot of these results just make tons of sense. How do we feel about what we're seeing here?
It's a very exciting time. There's also room for collaboration here. The city of Jacksonville, this is something that we developed a vision for and we're going forward with it, but we have other community partners that could be very beneficial to helping make it this bigger than life. What's the old saying, go big or go home? We're long overdue for a lot of these things. And, I grew up here, I've been here all my life, and I'm not going to tell you how long that's been, but, there's been times when, I would really have appreciated a lot more things to do. I was very creative at things to do, and sometimes that's not a good thing either. But I think this would give a lot of opportunity, not only for us economic development-wise, but as far as the community's quality of life. And that's the big thing, is what we can do for our citizens. And I think being collaborative with our county government, with the Tourism Development Authority. I think these are, and even the state. I mean, we've gotten a lot of funding here lately from the state, out of the state budget, and we got an opportunity here. And I think it's within reach, and this is great news. Great news.
Earlier today, Mr. Hagan was getting ready to cut checks, from the TDA perspective to go ahead and start building some fields. But, I think the stars are aligning on that. And one of the key points there too is that this is a regenerative investment. So, the more people we get in town, the more hotel nights that we're selling, the more sales tax we're collecting, the more that we can continue to reinvest.
And we couldn't have had a better opportunity for this land, this property to fall in our lap where it's located at. You're right up the street from all the hotels just about in Jacksonville and most of the restaurants.
Well, close to the pool that's going in.
And close to the pool, that's right. So, it's a very good opportunity here that's just all that materialized it.
Anthony, I want to say something too. Being somebody that grew up here, and I never really thought I would come back here because I was looking for a greater, bigger world, and I saw so many other opportunities, but I was glad to be able to come back here. And we talk about arts and culture and what that does to a community in terms of, there's a rapper called KRS-One, and he talks about edutainment. And arts have a way of not only entertaining, but educating people about each other, about others that they don't know about. So I love where we're going. And we have all these young folks that leave out of here. I tell folks, when I was in the military, it wouldn't be anything for me to go 4 hours away overnight to muster the next morning, to be there on time to do it all over again. Like you said, it might not have been the best thing or the smartest thing to do, but we did it. So we'll be able to keep some of that money in town. Yeah, it does. It does. And now that 50,
So we would rather them go here,
is paying
right,
for it,
and
right.
then muster in the morning,
Yeah,
with only
yeah,
a 30-minute
yeah.
car ride. So, but I also have to give the appropriate thanks to all the city staff member who have worked on this project. We've had some amazing people from our side contributing to this as well. So, who all do we have? Mr. Ray, Mr. Massey. We have Michael's back there, right? Who else do we? Susan? Oh, sorry, Susan. Oh, Ryan's here. And Sabrina. Sabrina's hiding, but, I'm sorry. And Wally's hiding behind Mr.
Definitely
Hagan.
a whole team effort, that's for sure.
Mr. Hagan's he's a member of the team too. So, again, this is great work, and I appreciate the feedback, because this is what we need to have the confidence to move forward with the next steps. So, community engagement process is over. Of course, we'll continue to take feedback, but it's time for us to summarize what we've learned and moved on. If you want copies of the summary reports, we can certainly provide those to you. There will be a design workshop that's going to jumpstart the whole process to determine what the 400 acres is going to look like. We're still kind of formulating on that, but it's going to be later this month. Again, I mentioned to you that this is going to be done in February, because this guy right here, Jason's going to make sure that it's going to happen that way. But to do that, we're going to have to come back and talk to council at some point in January about the design concept. And then Sarah is going to continually work on the Recreation and Parks Master Plan. And of course, that's going to come back in February. All of that being kind of the culminating event to then figure out what the next step is. Hopefully feed some of these results into the budgeting process so that we can start to execute. So that concludes the presentation. Any other questions?
Thank you very much for coming this evening. It's really great work you've done so far, and we're looking forward to getting this off the ground and, make it happen for our citizens. Thank you.
Mayor, we've got 2 items left, and it's up to you. We can go through those 2 items, or we can push those to the next meeting.
Anthony's not presenting them, is he?
Anthony's leaving, Mayor. We're going to kick him out.
Okay.
Paul was doing a slow walk
Inside
for some
joke.
reason.
Inside joke, okay?
Mayor, I don't know if he's leaving or he's staying. So,
Yeah. I think we could probably, everybody okay to knock these out?
Yep.
Okay. Wally?
Well, if he's talking, we might be here for a while.
I'll try not to take too long, but Ryan is going to jump in, so it's his fault if we go too long. So this evening, I'd like to take a brief minute, talk to you about the Southwest area sewer service that we have. This actually comes from a request, and I'll get into that in just a few minutes. But just a little bit of history. The city has a wastewater pump station located in the southwest area that ties directly into our force main that goes to Land App. That actually was constructed through a joint agreement with OMWASA, and it was precipitated actually by the Environmental Management Commission with the state of North Carolina. There's a large subdivision there, Springdale Acres, that's been there for many years. They were on a private community system that had failed, and the Environmental Management Commission stepped in and actually was trying to find a solution for that problem. They contacted OMWASA. OMWASA and the city began working together, and the solution became a study of the area with the construction, ultimately leading to the construction of a wastewater pump station. And then the wastewater treatment plant was abandoned. That subdivision was redirected to that new pump station, and that pump station became a city pump station because it was actually attached to our force main going to our Land App site. So fast forward, or from then till now, we built on WASA for the sewer use to that pump station for Springdale Acres. Currently, they have 110,000 gallons of allocation in that pump station. And then the rest of that pump station was built to serve either remaining development or future growth. And basically, the agreement, the interlocal agreement between the city and WASA laid out what that would look like, and I'll get into that in just a minute. But since then, we've actually had a couple of annexations in the area, which I believe you're all aware of. The first was Springfield Apartments. I always get these confused. Springfield Apartments and what is it? Cornerstone. Is that right? So Cornerstone Apartments. They're right on Blue Creek School Road. It was a vacant tract of land, and actually part of that has been constructed. People are living in it. It is city limits, and then the other part is currently under construction. And then the second was the Trask annexation on 53. Both of those developments were slated as future development as part of that agreement. So this is kind of what the basin looked like for that Southwest lift station. You can see that there's a lot of developed area in that basin. The idea through that agreement was that that developed area would go to ONWASA, and then through an agreement, ONWASA would bring that to the city. And then there's a lot of undeveloped area, and the thought behind that undeveloped area would be obviously annexation. So that gave us growth within this area, which was the advantage of a city-owned pump station. So these were the calculations. You can see that for Zone 1 and Zone 2, and really the reason there's a Zone 1, Zone 2 is that's a break. It's a natural break. So, and it's really right there along 53. So anything on the other side of 53 in that Zone 1 would probably have to be pumped back to the city's lift station. Zone 2, a lot of that could get there through gravity. Not all, but a lot. So that you can see Zone 1, the existing development was roughly 72,000. And then for Zone 2 is around 300. So about 400,000 gallons of our 640,000 gallon lift station was planned, recognizing there might be a need for failing systems in that area. And then as part of that, there was roughly 200 and, give or take, 30,000 gallons, 20,000 gallons for new development. Those estimates are all based on either current land use for existing development or what we call the 2T rules, which are laid out by the state. And one thing that I would add to that is there have been recent changes to that rule. For those that have been on council for a while, you're familiar with it's basically 120 gallons per bedroom. So if you take a 3-bedroom house, that's 360 gallons per day that you have to calculate. The new rule is 75 gallons. So it's actually 300 gallons, if I did the math right. So you can see that even some of with the changes in current rules, we may have some additional capacity, at least paper capacity calculated into that station. So this is what the sewer basin currently look like. We average somewhere between 105,000 and 130 or 35,000 gallons per day to that pump station. The existing sewer flow from Springdale Acres ranges from about 105,000 gallons to 110,000 gallons per day. So Omaha is very near what was allocated for that subdivision. And you can see the arrow coming in from the north is from that new apartment complex that is for city development. This is where Ryan's going to jump in. Real quickly, the yellow border that you see is city jurisdiction. The light hatched area is city limits. And then the blue circles are the growth areas that were identified as part of that basin. So those are all of the undeveloped property that the city or less developed, because there are some existing uses on some of that, but that use was underutilized for the size of the tract. So those are all designed to go into that future pump or that current pump station when those develop out. With that, I'll let Ryan add anything.
Crestfield Apartments.
That's it.
Not Cornerstone, Crestfield. Sorry, that was bonus. I had to look it up real quick. I won't take up a whole lot of time. I just wanted to use this opportunity to piggyback Wally's presentation to kind of remind council that, as Wally stated, the area in yellow is our jurisdiction. It's the ETJ. The city limits where this tract here, where the apartments are being constructed, and then over here is city limits. So this growth area, the area that could be served, that's currently ETJ. So as things develop, it'll either be through some sort of an agreement or through annexations. I point that out because we do have some growth area here that our infrastructure will service. So in a time where ETJ reduction is being talked about at the state level and possibly even give up ETJ like the city did for 4 or 5 times between 2013 and 2020, I think it was, we gave back ETJ. We purposefully kept this area in for this reason. So just kind of use it as an opportunity to kind of, remind the mayor and council about that issue and that kind of vision as far as some future growth for the city. That's all that I have.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
So what brings us to the discussion tonight is there is a subdivision, existing subdivision, that is just outside of the area identified for, as part of that original agreement that has failing, it's a multifamily subdivision, so mostly duplexes to quadplexes, and they have failing septic systems. And they are trying to figure out what they are going to go do with their sewer. They've actually contacted and hired John Pearson Associates, who submitted a request to OMWASA to be served, and then OMWASA took that request, evaluated it, and then forwarded us a subsequent request to amend the agreement to allow additional sewer through the Springdale Acres. So that that residential community is circled there in red. It's Countrywood Estates. You can see that's already developed. They have failing septic systems. They would have to completely redo the collection system inside of their existing subdivision, add pump stations, and pump it over to the Springdale area, Springdale Acres area, into their collection system, whereby it would flow to us. So the request from Onwassa is actually to amend the agreement to, instead of allowing 110,000 gallons, to 150 to cover this subdivision. So I know that's very brief. The request letter from Onwassa was in your agenda packet, along with some other, I think the amendment that was proposed. Onwassa does not meet until November, so this is not something that you have to consider tonight. But if you were willing to consider it tonight, I did draft up a staff recommendation that basically says that you would be willing to support the amendment, provided they do act on it at their first meeting. If they don't act on it at their first meeting, then I would have to bring it back to you. If not, we could wait, and I could bring it back to you at a subsequent meeting.
I don't think it matters one way or the other, does it?
I don't think it matters to us. Does it help Onwassa for us to take action now so that they can move when they make a decision?
A few things out. One of the things that Onwassa has to deal with that we do not is how they will cover the fees. Because the agreement states that we bill Onwassa a bulk rate. So our bulk rate's identified in our fee schedule. So it's very simple. For them, they've got to figure out whether, they have individual, how they're going to bill those residents. So they do have things that they're working through. So I can't say whether it would help them or not, but it would tell them where the city stood.
Mayor, for us, we like to bring a final document to council that's already been signed off by the other agency. We don't want to bring a document to you that is going to be changed and then we bring it back. So either way, if we feel confident in this document, then council could take action. If council has confidence moving forward, we can bring it back as a consent item should Onwassa approve it in its current state.
Let's do it that way.
The timing, we wanted to make sure that Wally could present this information to council now. That way, if you have any questions or concerns, we could take those back to Onwassa. And obviously, by presenting it, we're taking it to some members of Onwassa already. But if he needed to take anything else, then we would take it back. In terms of capacity, it is a big issue for us. We do have that concern consistently throughout. But in terms of partnership with one of our partners, it's very important to us to move this forward, because not only are we helping Onwassa, but we're helping some of our citizens in the area, and that's a big plus for us.
Onwassa's a long way from being able to provide sewer service in that area. I mean, they are talking about doing something further out 53 out in the Kenwood area, but that's still a good little ways out there. So.
And Kenwood currently comes to us.
Would it be,
Through an
when is their
agreement.
next meeting?
What's the Onwassa next meeting?
November, I think it's the second week in November, second Thursday maybe.
16th or something. That's kind of sticks in my mind off the top of my head.
Mayor, as soon as we have that, we'll put it on the next agenda for council.
Thank you, Wally.
Thank you.
Okay, so next we have number 18, which is our fund balance policy. And Sabrina, you're going to present this.
Good evening. Thank you for having me here this evening to talk about the fund balance policy. I know we've discussed it a few times in the past, and I did include, in your agenda packet is included a draft policy. So I'm just here tonight to get some direction, some guidance to see how you feel about what we've drafted so far, and kind of talk through how we came to that policy. So all of my disclaimers that I like to give when we talk about fund balance. Tonight I will talk about FY23 numbers, but our audit is not complete, so these are unaudited numbers. They are projected, and for the purposes of the fund balance policy, it strictly pertains to general fund. And our fund balance for FY23 is projected to be $40.55 million.
This is across all funds.
That's general fund, fund balance, all categories of fund balance.
When will the audit, I know typically we get it presented in October at,
It's usually the first meeting in November, and that's what
okay.
we're still planning on. We will have it submitted to the LGC by the October 31st deadline. So I do anticipate to have second partner comments on the financial statements by the end of this week. So we're very, very close. And when we talk about fund balance, we do have different categories of fund balance. And so I'm just going to briefly go through those five categories. We have the non-spendable fund balance, which is our $2 million compensating balance that we keep at the bank that prevents us from paying the fees, and then prepaids and inventory. Those are the balances that they're not in spendable form. So either they're contractually required to be separate or inventory. So, we can't spend that. Then we have restricted. These are amounts that are restricted to specific purposes, and that's externally imposed either by state statute or by creditors. So our stabilization by state statute that the LGC requires us to maintain, that is a formula that we calculate at the end of every year, and it does vary. It depends on our cash, our encumbrances, our liabilities, our restricted cash, and it's a formula that we use, and then when at the end of the year we have this number that the LGC says you have to set aside and you can't spend. And so for us at the end of FY23, that would be $7.8 million. And then we have our PAL bill funds, which have to stay separate, and then we have the 1.97 in escrow, and that would be all of our, like when we do installment purchase, we have loans, and the funds stay in escrow until we draw those down. And so in the general fund right now, we have 1.9 in escrow. And then committed is another category. It can only be used for specific purposes determined by the city council. And the only item that we have in, the only committed funds that we have in general fund are the special separation allowance that's set up for the police. And right now it's at $958,000. And we do add, I think we budget $400,000 to go over there annually. And then of course we pay that out to our retired law enforcement officers. And then we have our our assigned fund balance, and that is what we have appropriated for the next year's budget. So ending FY23, we had only appropriated $489,000 for FY24, so that amount remains assigned. And we don't spend that because we've already committed that to the budget. And that gets us to our unassigned fund balance, which is estimated to be $26.39 million at the end of FY23. And for the purposes of the fund balance policy, that is the part of the fund balance that the policy addresses. It's the unassigned and what amount are we comfortable having as the minimum or the max. And just a reminder of our fund balance over the last 5 years. You can see that this year in 23, we added a little bit of fund balance, which I thought I was pretty excited about because we had appropriated quite a bit that we thought we would be using. And so to get to the end and just actually add a little bit is good news. But in 2018, you can see our unassigned was only at $17.7 million, and we've increased that up to now $26.39. So Why do we need a fund balance policy? I think we know because we've talked several times about how, what's the minimum amount that you want to have in fund balance. And there's not a law that says that when it comes to unassigned. But we need to have a policy for several reasons. It's a best practice to have a fund balance policy, to ensure that we have adequate cash flow, that we are planning for contingencies during volatile times, COVID, hurricanes, things like that. But also it does enhance the city's ability to obtain the highest credit and bond ratings. And even oftentimes with grants and things like that, a question always comes up, do you have a fund balance policy? It's something that creditors like to see and grantors like to see as well. And then when we create the fund balance policy, we're trying to take into account several different things. We think about our operating expenses, what it takes to, to run the city day to day, emergencies. Oftentimes we talk about Hurricane Florence and the fact that it was $9 million just for debris removal, and revenue shortfalls. During COVID, there was a lot of discussion around sales tax and how that would be impacted, and we were lucky that that didn't happen, but things can happen that we want to make sure that we're prepared for. So just trying to protect ourselves against any current and future risk. And then for us specifically as a city, aside from the hurricanes that we always fear, we do have some large funding needs that are on the horizon. We just heard about the 400 acres and the great ideas that, will hopefully come to fruition. Well, that will require some funding. And then we have the SCBAs, which are the fire self-contained breathing apparatus. I've learned that, and those will require some additional funding for the fire department coming up. And then we have the ERP system, which I know there's been updates about, but that is in the near future. So the policy that was attached to the agenda is just a recommended policy that we thought was a good starting point. It is very similar to policies adopted by many of our peers in North Carolina. We compared our fund balance to other North Carolina local governments, which the LGC does that as well. And I know in the past there's been sort of the myth about the 8% fund balance, but really what the LGC does is look at our fund balance and look at the fund balance of our peers and make sure that, we don't look way lower than everyone else, or that we're not spending down our fund balance to low levels very quickly. That would be another thing that would trigger a red flag. But comparing ourselves to other governments in North Carolina is important. It defines the minimum as no less than 25% or 3 months of general fund expenditures. That is, again, in line with what many municipalities have, and it is conservative. When we talk about fund balance, I tend to be more conservative. When we talk about $9 million for a hurricane, you want to be sure that you're protected if that does happen. And then another thing the fund balance does, the fund balance policy does, is specify a maximum so that you're not, collecting a lot of fund balance and not spending the taxpayer dollars, so it's sort of a way to make sure that you're using the money as it is intended. And so for our policy, I had put 75% in there. Again, just, it's conservative and in line with what other people are doing. And then it also calls for a plan for replenishment of the fund balance. If we were to drop below that level, then the manager would bring forward a plan to replenish that fund balance within a certain amount of time, I believe 2 years. And then it talks about what you would do if you exceeded the 75%, which is move the additional into a capital project. You would pay cash for projects you would spend down the funds. And this, I just wanted to show you what the peer comparisons were that the LGC does look at. This is from FY22, but you can see the fund balance as a percentage of general fund expenditures. We are pretty well in line with most everyone else. Fayetteville a little bit, they're a little bit lower than the rest of us, but we're all pretty similar. And then for FY '23, if this were to be, our fund balance policy and we were following that, I just wanted to show what would trigger those minimum and maximum. So our general fund expenditures were $47.6 million, and again, current unrestricted at 26.39. So our minimum fund balance, the 25%, if we were to drop below the 11.9 million, then that would trigger a response from Mr. Ray to figure out, what are we going to do to build that fund balance back up. And then the max, anything over 35.7 million, we would say, okay, we have to have a plan to spend some of these extra funds. And that's it. I'll just take any questions or comments, suggestions.
Good work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very clear, thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Mayor, we want to do the same thing with that policy. We want to, you've got time now. If you've got any questions or comments when you go through it, send those back to us so that we can get that ready, bring it back, because we want to have that as we're moving into next fiscal year's planning just the same. So we want to wrap it up per our post-budget retreat and now as we head into next year.
When we saw the earlier presentation, I can see where some of that fund balance is probably going to end up eventually.
Yeah, and that's where that chart, Mayor, where Sabrina showed the work that the council's done over the last 5 years to get to that point. Obviously, you've done it for reasons because you're going to use those funds in some of these projects that you've been planning for. And so you'll see part of that ebb and flow between a 25% and a 75% as it comes up over the next few years. And then we do have a couple of those commitments that we have that we referenced earlier that will also come out of that fund balance for now. So I think we're going to see some excellent usage as we're moving forward. We're very excited.
Do we replace how many of the percentage of the breathing apparatus do we replace at one time?
Real quickly, Mayor, the reason you have that on there for the SCBA's is typically the way that works is you're replacing the whole system. So theoretically, come this time next year, when we start talking about these numbers, you could be looking at $1.2 million worth of SCBA's because of the way that you replace them in cycle. When they go out, they go out. And so you're bringing them in with, it's not like a vehicle per se, but it's the next best technology. And you don't want to ever have an SCBA that's on the old technology. It's one thing to use an old iPhone. It's another thing to ask DC Hayes to go in with an old SCBA. It's just not an option. So we're actually working on that strategy for if we could figure out a better replacement schedule. But this is another of those things where it's a national conversation. There's not a better schedule yet. So when these individuals bring forth that 1.2 price tag for a bunch of SCBA's, it's one of those things where we just have to say, okay, that's where the dollars come from. So,
See, part of what drives this is the standards change. I mean, we went through this discussion about 10 years ago, and got on a system that we thought was gonna be able to have modular replacement, and we'd be able to extend longer. There's gonna be our next workshop, scheduled to come and talk about this, so we can get into the details there. Yes.
yeah, that's where my knowledge ends right there. Because I've dealt with this now in 3 organizations where it constantly comes up. And that's how you know nationally it's consistent that the response is the same. Just like Mr. Massey's saying, you think you get that plug and play system where we're going to replace a couple components and it just doesn't work. And it's another area where you just can't risk it.
Thank you. I guess we'll go to the report section for tonight's meeting, and I'll start down at your end.
Proud to be here, so no report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was privileged last week to attend the first, Jacksonville's first recent visit with the ECC, with the Eastern Carolina Council of Governments. It was a great meeting, and we're looking forward to being strong partners in our region. And thank you for the appointment to attend that. And I'll just take 30 seconds, if you don't mind,
Please
and
do.
remind the public, anybody who's brave enough to watch this whole meeting or watch this whole recording all the way to the end, that Monday, October 23rd, we have the 40th anniversary of the Beirut Memorial Observation. It is going to be a full house. It starts at 10 a.m. If you want to get in and possibly have a seat, arrive early. And then there's also a Native American powwow happening Saturday and Sunday, November 4th and 5th at the American Legion Building. A couple of fun things going on, well, important and fun things going on in the community that we can support.
For Beirut is 10:30.
10:30? Thank you, sir.
Dr. Washington,
No report.
Mr. Jackson.
Yes, I attended a fire safety event that Fire Inspector Brian Kelly was instrumental in organizing with other local fire stations, and it was a great event. I didn't even really know it was coming up, but I was educated, very informative. And what was very impressive to me, there's a lot of young people in the communities that are part of the volunteer fire departments around the area. So, but that's all.
Thank you. Mr. Sosa.
No reports. Happy to be here.
No report.
I'll turn to Mr. Carter. Mr. Ray, you have some.
Go ahead if
city-
you got a minute, Mayor.
You got plenty of minutes.
Half?
You got as many as you need.
Okay, thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Well, I tell you, Mayor, again, we've had some good meetings, and I think that the comment earlier for the community, we've had 2 or 3 really good community meetings, and to have people show up and echo some of those sentiments leads us perfectly into our vision planning as we move on. That's an excellent one city moment, and I was excited to see members of the community to be here tonight, not only to voice their concerns and their comments, but to see the recreation land projects as well. What a value add for us as we're moving forward. And for that process, as we've said all along, it's community driven. And I promise you again and again, no matter who Anthony named out, none of us have led this discussion. We've been participants in this discussion, just like each of you have given your comments. I wasn't in on your meetings, and you may have said this is what we're going to do, and they may have listened to you. But in terms of staff, they're not listening to us drive it. It's driven by the community. For sure. So a couple events we had this last couple weeks. National Walk to School Day. You see this in a lot of our community neighborhoods, and it's very exciting. But for us, there's a national day that just draws some recognition to us. Mr. King and I were talking this morning about historically seeing people walk to school. I mean, a really long time ago, he was walking the streets here in Jacksonville going to school. And that seemed to turn out well. But now we had Officer Reyes and Sergeant Smith here being active with our young students as they go to school. Again, there's the sergeant. What a great day. What a great community involvement process. And even though it was mostly police officers, it looks like there's a fireman in the group here, only because those are the guys that always wear a uniform with a bright stripe on it. From this angle, Mayor, it looks like DC Hayes, but I won't call out any other names on that. And then, like Ms. Edwards pointed out, not only do we have the memorial on Monday, but we have our Yellow Ribbon campaign going on right now. And this is exciting for us because it does remind people of the thing that we're doing. We're remembering this Beirut incident. And that's a sad thing for us as a community. It's a sad thing around the world, but it's good for us to show that we remember. And that's one of the things that, Mayor, I saw you say last year in your speech when you were out in front of everybody is we remember, and we're going to continue to remember. So you see here Northwoods Park Middle School students and some Beirut veterans. They met at the memorial. They talk about the history, because if we don't talk about the history, we're going to forget it. And that's in a number of different topics that we have. But right now upon us is the opportunity for us to remember, to celebrate the veterans that we have, and to talk about something that's such a big impact on us as a country, but more specifically, us as a community. You're going to see these students, they're preparing all of these ribbons that you're seeing on trees, that you're seeing at the memorials, you're seeing throughout the community. And that's an awesome ad for us, because we talk about how we activate and engage our youth. This is a prime example. And these are middle school students that may be teetering on a time of, do they have civic engagement? Do they have that commitment? Is it something outside of a video game, a social media, maybe a sport? Well, these kids right here, even if they're told to be there, they're doing something that's a really big deal. And I hope we have some of them Monday that are able to be there for the event, because it's an awesome time for them to really appreciate interacting with our veterans. And here's that group picture. I will tell you, Mayor, we have a ton of great pictures. If anybody wants to see all the things that we had today, we cut it down. I had 50 slides and 50 comments and cut it down to about 10 because Mr. Jackson texted me earlier. But this is a time for us that's really special. Right here, you're going to see the Onslow Civic Affairs Committee have partnered with the Chamber to create an access point so that you can get these ribbons. Any business that wants to be a part of our Yellow Ribbon campaign, I still urge you to get to the Chamber of Commerce and pick up your ribbons. If you can't get to the Chamber for some reason, come see us. We'll get you a ribbon. We've got them. We've got some left over, but we'll make sure that if you want to show your support and you want to show that you remember, then give us the opportunity to help you make a statement, and it's an awesome statement. You're going to see here, some of these things are really cool. When you put the ribbon up, and it really goes back towards, that's the focal point, and then you see City Hall. You're going to see the ribbons all around the community. It's no bigger than last year. It's no bigger than the year before. It may be the 40th remembrance, but it's always huge. And throughout the year, we remember. You know, a lot of people don't take their ribbons down. They just refresh their ribbons, and you can't get mad at them through our processes. So the opportunity to have here, you'll see here at our other monument here, and you see multiple ribbons placed. What an awesome activity to see the ribbons placed around the community. Thank you for all the volunteers that stepped up to put ribbons up throughout this event. This happened through the weekend and then up until yesterday. Great job for all of you that were out and about and doing the job that the community can appreciate. The last item I have on here, Mayor, is One Place had their groundbreaking ceremony the other day, and you talk about being able to pivot. They've been working on this project for a few years, and they understand how to pivot. When the good Lord said there will be rain, they called our Parks and Recreation departments, and Susan and Michael said, we can make this happen, and they made it happen instantaneously. You know, the only downside is Mr. Warden didn't read from the script, Mayor. So, he showed up to speak for the city, and he did it off the cuff, which was beyond impressive. He really shared what he's seen as this impact that One Place is having on our community and what it's going to have moving forward. And even though Ms. Marshburn wrote him a wonderful speech that I read and said was amazing, he ripped that thing up, threw it down, and said, I'm not reading what Rose wrote. I'm going to do it on my own. And he did an amazing job representing the community. You see there was a ton of members of the community here. Everybody is so excited about the synergy coming around One Place with what we're going to work on for the city projects, with what the county's working on, with the YMCA, with the Boys and Girls Club. We have so many partners that are excited to be a part of what's happening here. And Mayor, as you've said it, we do deserve nice things, and you're going to see that with this One Place facility. Afterwards, they allowed us to take a picture just because we appreciated being there, and we appreciate the opportunity. Chief Yanero served on that board for a number of years now, and that just shows our commitment to a bigger picture that's not just the city, it's multiple partners in and around that are active throughout in everything that we do. So, Mayor, that shows you we've had an active 2 weeks here in the community. It's going to be more active on Monday. I do hope that anybody that can make it Monday, I reiterate what Ms. Edwards is saying. Hope you can join us. As for the city staff, we're going to encourage all of our people to be there if they want to be a part of that remembrance.
Would you mind going back one? I just wanted to So I'm previewing my Halloween costume there. I'm going as a grumpy old man, so,
Well, that's a, well, that
that's,
really
that's
doesn't take a
me,
whole
that's
lot of
me
effort,
next
did
to
it?
Logan, in case you didn't recognize.
Boy, that's appropriate.
I'm gonna leave it on the street, Mayor. Thank you so much.
Thank you for leaving it there. With that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying
Aye, aye,
aye. All opposed?
Thank you.